Well, welcome to our Rainbow Covenant studio. I'm here with Wookie and with the keeper of the cables, Rich. We're ready to jump right back into another episode of Appalling Twistianity to lay out the credentials that Yahweh would offer for this assessment of the Christian New Testament. He inspired his prophet, Yahshua, known as Isaiah, to write what is now known as the 11th chapter of his book. And it is devoted in its entirety to the presentation of the Towrah. And we're told that the Towrah emerges out of the root stock of what gave life to Dod, our King and Savior, our Messiah, the very Son of God. And that he would stand up and be noticed, that he was also to be known as the Parah, which means he is the productive bull that is to be sacrificed as part of the Towrah celebration in year 6000, 2033. He is the only human in the history of humanity to have received the seven spirits of Yahweh. These include the spirit of Yahweh, the spirit of intelligence, the spirit of understanding, the spirit of being able to perceive the entire picture that God has presented from beginning to end, the spirit of confidence and character to present the truth even when it is exceedingly unpopular, the spirit of being able to know what is important so that you can process the information correctly, and also the spirit of respect for Yahweh and for his name. Additionally, we are told by accepting the offer and responding appropriately, this Towrah will be perceptive with regard to developing a profound admiration and respect for Yahweh. And that is indeed true. That is why all of the books that you will find that I have written that are presented in their entirety for free at yadayah.com are entitled Yada Yahowah, to know Yahweh. Therefore, it will not be by an appearance or vision seen with his eyes that he will decide. There were prophets whom Yahweh showed visions of past or present events that the prophet was then asked to write about so that they could portray what would occur. This wasn't altogether common, however. For the most part, Yahweh spoke through his prophets by saying, "Thus says Yahweh." And this is pervasive throughout. There's also prophetic books where Yahweh inspired the prophet to speak things that were profoundly important for us to know, such as the case in David's, Mizmor, and Mashal, Psalms and Proverbs. And there are times when Yahweh simply uses the mouth of the prophet to declare what he wants known, and such is the case of the Torah's Dabarim, called Deuteronomy, which is words. So there are a variety of different ways, but there were on occasion prophecies that were revealed through visions. That would not be the case with the Towrah. Heretofore, the Towrah has only seen one vision, and it was very brief, and it was in appreciation for recognizing that he had been asked to be the Adamah Parah, this bloody red man of the earth who, as a productive bull, will be sacrificed on Towrah. And having realized that that's what the prophet Yahshua Isaiah spoke of in the 17th chapter, and that he alluded to here in the 11th chapter, and is discussed in the Torah in the 19th chapter of Numbers, Yahweh just instantly put a picture in my mind so that I might understand the setting that this will take place around. And then, of course, immediately directed my attention to the story of Elia as he orchestrated the rebuke of religious and political Israel 2,888 years ago, when also sacrificing a bull, and made it quite clear that these events will be enormously similar. And so that's the only vision, if you will, that the Towrah has received. And come to find out, while it was kind of Yahowah to provide it so that you might have some understanding of what's coming and be prepared for it, as we've continued to read through the prophets and continue to translate and retranslate, we've found that every bit of what I had perceived is actually foretold and described through the prophets. So this isn't going to be a appearance or a vision seen with his eyes, that he will decide, that he will confront the evidence and judge it, making decisions. No, he is going to read the preponderance of what he comes to know from the Torah, Mizmor, and Nabi that had been written thousands of years previously. It also says that he will not use hearsay, heard with his ears, that he will make judgments or prove his arguments. Again, this is to challenge and make distinct what appears in the Christian New Testament, the Talmud, and the Quran, which are entirely hearsay. There wasn't a single rabbi, whether it be in Jerusalem in the 2nd century or in Babylon in the 5th and 6th century, that was an eyewitness to anything they wrote about. It was all about hearsay, sometimes 50 generations down the line. And the Christian New Testament is the same thing. Paul was the first to write. In fact, the first 14 books historically in the Christian New Testament were all written by Paul, who was not an eyewitness to anything that he spoke of. And going beyond that, then you're dealing with Mark, who was a book of hearsay, and Luke, a book of hearsay, Matthew, a book of hearsay. And we don't have a clue who wrote John, just as we don't have a clue really who wrote Matthew, although both were written in 95 CE, which makes them hearsays 3 generations removed from the truth. So hearsay is all that religion has. You look at Muhammad, the majority of the Quran is rabbis selling Muhammad Talmud sightings that Muhammad twisted to serve his particular agenda and then attribute to Allah. And so the Talmud is hearsay, and Muhammad's twisting of it is hearsay twice over. And so the religious texts are all hearsay. And instead of that, this Towrah is going to make his judgments and prove his arguments by reading what the prophets had to say. He's going to get it directly from them. An entirely different and more effective way to prove one's case. Yeshayah, Isaiah 11:3. Yahowah would go on to say through Yeshayah, Isaiah, he will exercise good judgment. There will be many distinctions of this particular Towrah. One is with the Spirit of Yahowah, he's obviously going to speak in Yahowah's name. He's going to convey Yahowah's message. He is going to have testimony that is consistent with what Yahowah has given to us through his Torah, prophets, and Psalms. He is going to speak intelligently, which means his go-to verb is not going to be the F-bomb. And that makes him fairly unique today because that seems to be the dumbed down vocabulary of so many that I encounter on X. And it is a unique characteristic that this person is actually going to make the connections necessary to understand, and that he is going to have a backbone, which that was my whole confrontation on X today. I'm so tired of these large pro-Israel accounts pandering to their own popularity as opposed to having the courage to tell the truth. And there's not one of them that is willing to do that. And so this individual, Choder, is going to have the backbone and the character and courage to tell the truth, knowing that it won't be popular. He's not trying to be liked. He's trying to have God's name and testimony known. And it says here that after all of these things, and being able to put together the entire picture and share it in an intelligible manner, and having a high respect for Yahweh's name, having the instant recall of tremendous knowledge based upon what God has conveyed and what he has learned through his life, that this Choder and Parah, this bull, he's going to be exceedingly judgmental. He is Shaphat. At a time when Yahweh had long gone without a Shaphat in our presence. And it's been 3,000 years since Yahweh spoke through a Shaphat, a man who is judgmental. You know who the last Shaphat was that God spoke through? Samuel. Right answer. That is correct. Samuel was the last Shaphat that God spoke through effectively. And when the children of Israel chose to have a king in the manner of the Gentiles, Shamuel assumed that they had rejected him as the Shaphat, as the one that would help them decide and continue to be right about God. And when he came to Yahweh and said, I've let you down, I've disappointed you, I have failed, because the people want a king over them as opposed to me serving in the role of Shaphat. And Yahweh's immediate response to him was to say, no, they didn't reject you, Shamuel. They rejected me. And then he says, I want you to tell this to the children of Israel. I want you to tell them that by choosing a political government over the Torah, this is what they will bring upon themselves. And he listed 12 things that are germane to human government, and they are horrific. It's the veritable enslavement of people where no one has any rights but the kings, and a constant quest for more and for war and for bribing the inner circle, so that the inner circle, whether they be religious or military, will support the king to the detriment of all others. And that's what they brought upon themselves. So it's been a very long time since Yahweh had a judgmental person representing him. And this time he is saying that his Choder is going to be Shaphat, judgmental. By seeking to be accurate, honest, and forthright. This is a word that we have talked about extensively in our other programs because Yahweh uses it extensively. It is the single most frequent term that God uses in conjunction with his chosen one, with his beloved son, with our king, with our savior, with our Messiah. Yahweh says repeatedly that David is Sadak, right, accurate, honest, forthright, vindicating, consistent, verifiable. And now Yahweh is affirming that his Choder is all of these things, that he will be very similar to God's beloved son, our Messiah, Dod. And what this means is that he will, in fact, do as Yahweh has foretold, that the lesser luminary will reflect the greater luminary's light, just as the moon reflects the brilliance of the sun. He will be Sadak about God. And I will tell you that if you want to challenge that, if you just want to verify that, please go to YAHOWAH.com. Yada means to know. Yah is the familial force version of Yahweh's name, YAHOWAH.com, where every book on the shelf, all 35 of them, are free. And check them out for yourself. What you'll find is that the translations are unlike any that have ever existed previously. They're an amplified translation using a very different style that lends them to immediate verification and validation. I have taken and put in bold the key aspect of the statement, like in this case, seeking to be accurate, honest, and forthright. Then I take the Hebrew word that is being translated in its most generic form, so you can copy it and paste it into a search engine to validate whether that translation is correct or not. In this case, Zadok. And then amplify it, being fair and correct in accord with the truth, avoiding any conflict, inconsistency, and valid pursuant to the established standard. That is Zadok. And then an end of the parenthetical. With the Hebrew word scrubbed also of the diacritical markings, and with all translations checked to see if there's an older witness among the Dead Sea Scrolls. No one's ever done that before. And then in doing that, I've offered a running commentary that not only expands upon the words themselves, but using Chakma intelligence and using Bien, the connections needed to understand, I have elaborated on what God had to say so that it's applicable to your life. No one has ever done these things previously. And so God is saying, I've fact-checked him. And after fact-checking him, I can tell you that the Towrah is accurate, honest, and forthright. Now, if you're saying, okay, I'll go along with that. The Towrah is going to be accurate, honest, and forthright, and be the recipient of the 7 spirits of Yahowah, and that he's going to be judgmental as all get out. Got it. So what makes you think you're the Towrah? Well, do you know what time it is? Have you checked your watch? Have you looked at the calendar? We're between 1 and 2 years from the beginning of the time of Jacob's troubles. There is no time for somebody to emerge now and say, oh, by the way, I'm going to be right about God. I'm going to give you amplified and accurate translations of the Torah, the prophets, and Psalms. I'm going to put 30 some odd books on the shelf and offer them to you freely, and a comprehensive analysis with thousands of previously unheralded insights. I'm going to reintroduce you to Yahweh's name. I'm going to tell you that the Quran and the New Testament are absolute rubbish, and I'm going to write 10 books that prove that they're untrue so that the lies can be cleared away and that Israel can be protected from them. And then the truth becomes visible again. And then to share that the Son of God and the Messiah, our Savior, is David. Are you waiting for someone to come around and do that? Because if you are, you're out of time. Or do you want to pretend that this person has already existed and no one ever noticed him? That the prophecy is, well, a waste of breath because this person came and gone and has gone, and no one has noticed that this person actually existed? Or is your take that, no, well, you know, God had a pretty good track record. He got a lot of stuff right, but this one, this was a goof. He got this one wrong. He predicted a Towrah and he got no takers. What's your choice? God has a false prophecy when he's gotten every other prophecy right? I don't think so. That this person came and was unnoticed, meaning that the prophecy was a waste of breath. That an entire chapter of Yeshaya, complete waste of time. That there's somebody else today that is capable of fulfilling this role and doing all that is ascribed to this person with the 7 spirits of Yahowah, and that is going to step in and accomplish even 1% of what I've done as a result of this mission and calling. And they're going to make themselves vulnerable to you, available to you in these ways. And they're going to do so and present the entire timeline from beginning to end, so you know exactly where you are and what's going to occur between now and the time that Dowd and Yahowah return. Mathematically impossible. It is. It is about as likely as a tornado going over a junkyard and building a 747 that's flyable in the process. That would be the likelihood of this miraculous occurrence. Now, I'm here to tell you that Yahowah and I have been about this now for 24 years. That's a long time. And we didn't start on a clean slate, if you will. There was already a foundation of considerable knowledge, of understanding by participating in economics at the highest levels, of world travel, being in 175 countries, of being so engaged in Christianity to understand this menace from the inside out, to have rubbed shoulders with some of the most powerful people in politics, to know that menace as well. And then 24 years of every waking hour devoted to understanding the testimony of Yahowah and conveying it to you. That's a lot of time, folks. It's over 100,000 hours prior to or after the foundation that was set for somebody to be that involved in religion and politics and economics and in perceiving the world as it is, then devoting the rest of their lives to building upon that knowledge and understanding so they could deliver the contents of what you find freely offered on the shelf at YAHOWAH.com. So those are your options, folks. And all of this, he says, by seeking to be accurate and honest and forthright, Tzedak. I'd find somebody that would even talk about Tzedak. Who else is there that is speaking about Tzedak? Well, speaking to you in Yahowah's name about the most Tzedak of all, who is Dowd. With regard to opening the doorway for the discerning, Dal. Advice on providing a way in for the few and otherwise insignificant, using spoken words to disclose the entrance on behalf of those who would otherwise be disenfranchised and unpretentious. Dal. Written with a Daleth, which is the doorway, and a Lamed, which is the shepherd's staff that points the way. Nasher has gone for a pool party already this morning, and she has a tendency to bite her nails after she goes for a pool party. So sometimes we have to get her attention so that she changes her focus away from biting herself. She's made such progress, but she will revert from time to time. So excuse me as I try to deal with it. I don't like my beloved Asher harming herself. So with regard to opening the doorway, do you know where the doorway is? How many people do you think know where the doorway is? Daleth, Lamed. Well, it was the man wielding the shepherd's staff who became the doorway. It is his blood that is on the doorway. It's a man who is the foremost shepherd of Yisrael. The man who is so associated with the doorway that his name has 2 doorways in it. It's only 3 letters long, and it has 2 doorways in it. David. He is the doorway. He fulfilled Pesach. Pesach opens the doorway to life. By the way, that word that is dal is from dalah, which means to draw conclusions and therefore to be discerning. It goes on to say, we had a lot to say about this individual, as you can tell. He is all in with this fellow because, well, by the time that this fellow is put into play with the seven spirits of Yahowah, there is no opportunity for what we say in golf, a mulligan. God doesn't have a backup plan to this one. The Towrah prevails in collaboration with Yahowah, or the earth is destroyed, that the last four Moed Mikri are not fulfilled. That the whole project that Yahowah began by creating the universe and conceiving life and then conveying his Torah instructions would all be for naught if we fail. And that is why God went all in to assure our success. So it says, he will provide proof using sound arguments. Yeah, this fellow, he's not going to be much for beliefs, faith, or opinions. If you want to know what he believes, what his faith is, or what his opinion is, he's just going to shut you down and says, I got none. You either know or you don't know. You understand or you don't understand. And if you know and you understand, you can provide proof. If you're going to say that the Towrah is the only person in human history to be imbued with the seven spirits of God, you know where to show the proof. If you know that this is the same person that is the parah, the bull that is mentioned in Yeshayah 17 regarding the final two harvests, Shabuah and Towrah, you know where to go to find the proof. If you know that the master of ceremonies over the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah is going to be coordinated by the great orator who took religious and political Israel to task, Elijah, he can show you where to look. He proves his case using evidence and reason. With everything out in the open, doing so fairly. I went into a description of the type of translations that you will find if you read the books on the shelf at yadayah.com. Everything is open and on the table. I tell you the word, in this case, it's my shore. I tell you the word. I tell you the elements that comprise that word. I give you the word so that you can look it up and validate it yourself. And then I translate it boldly and bluntly for you. And then I check the Dead Sea Scrolls to see if there is an older, more credible reference to the particular statement that is being rendered. And I scrub the word of two things that are essential. One is diacritical markings, because the rabbis in the 11th century CE augmented the text with their marks to make the text appear more religious and more in keeping with their religion, Judaism. I scrubbed them all away because they are not necessary. Hebrew had 5 vowels amongst the 22 letters. They can all be pronounced using the Hebrew vowel system. So in this case, Mashor is from Yashar, which means to be right, to be approved, and to be candid. And with the my preface, it is to ponder all things related to being right, approved, candid, and therefore forthright. Putting everything on the table, up in the open, doing so fairly. It's why before we began this Yahowah blog, where I'm speaking directly to you, I wrote these 35 books and put them on the shelf so you could validate what it is that I'm conveying to you. Because if you want things out in the open, the best way to do it is to put them in writing. That is the easiest way for anyone to fact check them. And God says then that I have done so on behalf of the sincere who are seeking straightforward answers. Anah. Anah is from Anah. This is written with a wah as opposed to the hey, but it is from the same family of words, and it means to respond after receiving answers and to testify as a witness. The sincere who are seeking straightforward answers. That is whom we are serving. And that means that we're not serving the religious. We're not serving the political. The political and the religious do not care for answers. They are not sincere. Their whole mindset is to justify their own positions and to demonize anyone who will speak against them. You properly state that Donald Trump is a confabulator, that he is a narcissist, that he is psychotic, all of which are irrefutable. And yet you will have the MAGAs come after you and accuse you of all manner of terrible things. And the fact of the matter is, all they have is the ad hominem argument, which is a fallacy. And the truth is that, therefore, the same thing is true with the religious, who, if you expose the reality and prove it, that Jesus Christ is nothing but a crude counterfeit, produced via identity theft by Paul, 20 years after these events played out, and that it was David who served as the Passover lamb, you'll be vilified by the religious. They're not straightforward. They don't want answers. They're not sincere. And God here is saying that he's doing so for all of those on earth, and particularly for those in the land. And this is good news, because it means that we do not have to have this message resonate with everyone. I'm not in the position that Moshe was in. Moshe had to lead the children of Israel, who were mostly religious, and they had their own agenda. And Moshe said, that's impossible. I don't want this job anymore. I want out. No one can lead them. I'm not in the position that Dode was in, where he had to protect and govern a group of people who continued to be religious and political and pursued a conspiratorial uprising against him. My message is not for everyone. My message is just for those who are sincere, who want honest answers, who are not religious, who are not political. And that makes the job possible. If it were not for God intervening there and say that all of his judgment, all of the 7 spirits that are being devoted to this cause, the entire dedication to this process are for those who are sincere, who are honestly seeking answers, then I'd be in the same position that Moshe and Dode were in, where you would give up. I would give up. With the religious and the political, the job cannot be done. There is no amount of evidence and reason even coming directly from God that will change their perception. You can tell a Christian or a Muslim, God said the following, and he proved that it was he who inspired these words. And these words are in complete conflict with your religion. And rather than thanking you and from saving them from a false religion, Christianity and Islam or Judaism, they will attack you. They cannot be reasoned with. The job would be impossible if the job required convincing them. But fortunately, God's not interested in the majority of people. He's not trying to save everybody. He even said in the second statement that he etched in stone that we ought not be religious and that we should not associate with anything that is religious in nature, because those who are religious corrupt their sons to the 3rd and 4th generation. And then he said that his mercy, the benefits of his covenant, will be afforded to those who closely examine and carefully consider its terms and conditions, and they will be thousands. Thousands, my friend, amongst billions is 1 in a million. Let me tell you that again. thousands amongst billions is 1 in a million. God said that his mercy, his favoritism, his generosity and kindness are being given to thousands. So God's not trying to save everyone. As a matter of fact, if you're part of a popular religion that has millions of people, you are not with Yahweh, but are opposed to him. That's what the whole concept of set apart means. You're set apart unto man, under the most popular of human institutions, religion, or the second most popular, politics. Where to be with Yahweh, you have to be set apart unto him, which means you cannot be political or religious. So then it says he will strike, verbally attacking and disabling. This man is not going to be a pacifist. This man is not going to be a conciliatory individual. He is not going to be a politician. He is not going to try to find common ground. No. God is not trying to win over the world. He wants the religious and the political struck down. He wants us to attack them. He wants to disable what it is that they are trying to perpetrate. He wants them crippled and incapacitated. He wants someone who is sarcastic and willing to mock them, chastise them, and judge them. That is who Yahweh is choosing. Have you ever listened to Elia? I mean, listen to Elia. He's the one guy that Yahweh said, listen, I like this guy so much. And his ability to be sarcastic and to mock the political and the religious, I'm bringing him with me. I'm taking him out of this situation because I got a job for him that is vastly more important than what he did just here over that sacrifice of that bull. I'm bringing him back for the greatest show on earth, which is the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah. I'm going to bring him back as one of the two witnesses, and he is going to attack the religious and the political in Israel and the world. Strike them, attack them, disable them, incapacitate them. What did Elia do after mocking the religious and political establishment in Israel? He killed them. This is what he did. That's how serious God is about Naka, confronting, crippling, chastising, judging, ravaging, defeating. Yeah, this Choder, he would have to have Gabor and the spirit of Gabor and he'd also have to have Shaphat, be judgmental, because his job is to verbally strike, attacking and disabling with words, confronting, crippling, and incapacitating, sarcastically mocking and chastising and judgmental words. All of those who are religious and political. That is the job. That is how Yahweh wants it done. And so if you find a choter, you think there's another one, and this guy, he is just affable and lovable, and he speaks so kindly to everybody, and he finds a common ground between the various religious factions. So he brings Muslims and Christians together, and he brings the Marxists and the MAGAs together, and he's this great consolidator of human opinions. Then what you have found is the advocate for the devil. That's not God's way. God's way is set apart. It's uncommon. It is unreligious. It is unpolitical. It is non-conspiratorial. He isn't trying to bring people together. He's trying to rip the lies and the liars apart. And he's using the choder that way. So then he will strike, verbally attacking and disabling the material realm, the earth, with the rod and the staff of his mouth, and thus his voice. I don't think there's ever been anyone who has made such a distinction of saying that the best solution for almost any problem, any adversary, particularly the adversary now of Islam, are words. Words wisely wielded are the most effective rods and staff on behalf of God's people in the truth. It is why I constantly chastise the popular pro-Israel accounts and tell them that you need to start using and wielding words wisely. You need to be condemning. You need to strike out at the political and the religious who are seeking to destroy you. And they're afraid. They're either afraid or they're so enamored with likes and popularity that they don't want to say or do anything that would cause the algorithms to say, nope, that is not acceptable. We're going to spank you for that. We're going to hide your post. We're going to change the algorithm so what you have to say just doesn't go out to very many people. We're going to make certain that we prune your followers so that you have fewer of them and make a lesser impact. That's how all those systems work. They're allergic to the truth. And yet, the mission is not to be popular. The mission isn't to derive a following. The mission is to tell the truth and to do so harshly, bluntly, boldly, in an uncompromising manner. If you know that Islam, and I do, is a call for genocide, that Allah called Muslims to all die killing for him, which means after they have killed all non-Muslims, they will fight among themselves until there's no one left on this planet. And if you understand the history of Marxism and how Hitler used Marxism, as did Stalin, as did Mao, to concentrate power for the purpose of control, and how it led to the deprivation of rights and to dignity and to life. Once you know these things, you can attack them using words. And if those who follow me on X and on Facebook and on YouTube know, we wield words wisely. This is the job. And so Yahweh has made it very clear that this man will use the words spoken by his mouth as the rod and the staff to attack, strike, and disable, to cripple and incapacitate the forces that are at play in religion, politics, and conspiracy in this world. I want you to find another person that is doing that. We have a lot of people out there that want to critique, criticize, demean what Yahweh has called and asked me to do. And yet there isn't anyone else doing it. And so before you decide that I think I want to take a swipe at him and I want to slander him and I want to pretend that he is not who he claims or who God claims he is, why don't you find somebody that's doing it? Or why aren't you doing it? Why don't you applaud him for doing what God has asked? And with the spirit of his lips and resulting language, words wielded wisely. In this case, Yahweh was saying that his Ruach is not just providing him with the spirit of Yahweh, not just providing him with the spirit of supreme intelligence, of complete bien understanding after Chakma, and of this ability to know the entire picture from beginning to end, and the spirit of boldness through Gabor, and the spirit of Dayat, knowledge, and the spirit of Yara, respect and reverence for Yahweh, and this ability to deduce the truth judgmentally of Shaphat. That the foremost means of knowing whom Yahweh is working through and to benefit from him is to listen to what he has to say. His tools are words. He will love words. He will wield words wisely. He will speak the words of Yahweh. And in this case, Yahweh is going so far as to say that his lips are controlled by the Ruach. And his lips are not only controlled by the Ruach, his lips are controlled by the Ruach to devastate the religious and the political, those who are wrong about God, the Rasha, those who are in revolt against what Yahweh had to say regarding his son, his name, his Bareth covenant, his Moed invitations to meet his people, Yisrael and Yehudah. He will speak out and berate the Donald Trumps, the Macrons, the Starmers, all of these people, the Mertz, a whole gaggle of goons in that administration. All of them. He is going to lash out, not just with language, but language which will devastate the religious and the political, because his lips are controlled by the Ruach of Yahweh. Now you might say, oh, come on, that's not fair. You're not speaking the very words of God. Oh, yeah. What does this say? What does this say? And let's go back again. Who else even understands that the Towrah prophecy exists? I mean, Christians will try to wipe it off and say, well, it belongs to Jesus. Jesus was this branch. But it's not a branch. It's a stem off the main branch. And the main branch is Dode. And this person has the spirit of Yahweh. And this is going to respect Yahweh to the point that this person foremost message is that God's name is Yahweh. And your guy didn't do that, did he? And you don't have a clue what this guy said, because he didn't write a word down, did he? Not a word did he write down. And you don't even know what he said, because the earliest people to pretend that they recorded what he said weren't even there. And they did so 40 years after the fact. So you don't have a clue as to what he said. He didn't write anything down, and there was nobody that conveyed what was allegedly said within 40 years of the fact. And even then, the first three of them, and probably all four, were based on hearsay, because they weren't there. Not a one of them was there. Can't belong to Jesus. It wasn't Jesus the one that said, judge not lest you be judged? And this says, no, this guy's going to be really judgmental. The opposite, isn't it? And of course, religious Jews, they have only part of this one, because it is so obvious that this person is being designated by God himself as being vastly more intelligent than they are. That he's right about Yahweh. They don't want any part of it. They skip right over it. So they don't have an answer. They got nobody that qualifies ever for this. And the Christians stop it at the beginning, because it clearly this does not apply to their myth. So now what? And this person is devastating the Russia. Russia is universal, popular, religious, and political revolt against God. That's what Russia is. Pesha and Russia convey the same concept. with Russia being even stronger in this regard. It is those who are religious. And this is saying that his words are going to devastate them, destroy them, even kill them. Did you see the words of pretend Jesus killing anyone? No. So, the fact of the matter is that the Choder's words are inspired by Yahweh, and that his words are exceedingly destructive to the religious and the political, and that he wields them wisely and is exceedingly judgmental regarding them. And that ultimately, when the Choder returns with Elia, their words will be like swords. You want to challenge them, they're not going to debate you. They will incinerate you. Yeshayah, Isaiah 11:4. Being right, correct, and honest will be the belt around his waist. And the trustworthy and reliable nature of this witness will be the band girding him. There we are again. This is Amunah. Amunah is one of my favorite Hebrew words. It means to be reliable, to be trustworthy. It speaks of integrity and dependability, of testimony that is real, genuine, of the person who is conveying it to be steadfast and unrelenting. It is from Ammon to support, confirm, and reveal that which is trustworthy and reliable. It is Ammon that was corrupted to Amen and became the name of Egyptian gods and goddesses, and that has been now to conclude a prayer. In God's name we pray, Amen, which is to say we're praying in the name of the Egyptian god. Tutak, Amen Ra. Yeah, that one. But not this fellow. The Choder, he knows what Amunah means. He knows what it comes from. He knows that it speaks of being steadfast, of being genuine, of being truthful and honest. And he knows that this is what is essential to Yahweh, particularly at this time, which is why this was said of him in Yeshayah, Isaiah 11:5. I have composed more testimony pursuant to Yahweh than have Moshe, Dod, and Yeshayah, and Yirmiyah, Hosea, Chabauk, Yoel, Malachi, combined. Let that sink in just a moment. What is the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, and even including the false books like Ezekiel and Job and Jonah, Song of Solomon, Ecclesiastes. If yours includes Enoch, that would be one of those as well. How many pages? 1,000, 1,500? Well, the Yada Yahowah series, speaking for Yahweh, is 25,000 pages. They've written 5 to 7 times more than all of Yahweh's prophets combined. That's wielding a lot of words, folks. How many words did pretend Jesus write down?
0.
None. How many words as a testimony to what pretend Jesus might have said were written down within 40 years of his life. How many words were conveyed by eyewitnesses? Sorry, but that's the truth. Deal with it or not deal with it, that's your choice. But when this says that he's going to wield words in this way, who do you think he's talking about? So after that rather enlightening and inspiring introduction to Yahweh's Towrah, clearly God is all in with this fellow. He is literally his lips. He is literally using his mouth, as he did Moshe in Debadim, as he did Dode in some of his most beloved songs. Now, that is not to say that the Towrah is a piece of equipment, that he is nothing more than a megaphone. God doesn't work that way. When he was told by the children of Israel to go away and never speak to them again, and he says, yeah, I can deal with that. I have a different way of going about it. And he chose from that point on about 20 men and 40 all total, if you consider those who don't have texts that were written by their own hand. I'll communicate through them. When God communicates through one of his prophet also reflects on what's being said. They give a human credibility to it. And so God would much prefer to have the person speaking for him learn from him as his child over a considerable period of time, being nurtured and reared by God to come to greater understanding, and then to be put in a position after that time that this person has enough knowledge and understanding and has developed enough character and backbone to stand up and to speak for him. Now, sometimes it was a crash course. Look at Dode, 8 years old. He met Yahweh, and he was still in his teens when he faced Goliath. But look at the consequence of that. Because they didn't have all of this time together to develop this relationship, Dode stumbled all over himself and ultimately lost his kingdom to an uprising by his son. And he was only saved by a man that had the right backbone and courage to intervene. And finally got Dode's attention and said, stop wallowing all over yourself. Stop crying. Stand up for what Yahweh has given you. And at this time, we don't have the option for someone else to intervene and to show up. This is your last hurrah. And time has run out. So Yahweh is indeed all in with his Towrah. And this is an exceptional prophecy. And yet it continues by introducing the Nesh. The Nesh is a written document. It's a sign. And it is being used by God, who is the one who is lifting it up for a specific purpose, and that is to call his people home. So of this individual who is going to, and already has, eviscerated the credibility of the Christian New Testament and destroyed the myth of Jesus Christ, and has done the same to the Quran and the myths of Muhammad and Allah. God says, then it shall come to pass in that day, Yom Hahu. Yes, there will be a day when it will come to pass. The root which anchors and nourishes, the sheresh, the base and foundation, the source of the family line, that which is steadfast. Of Yishe, which is to stand out and be noticed, the very source of Dode David, who showed the way to the benefits of the relationship, will stand up, be present, and accounted for, approaching as a nesh sign, a standard bearer, as a signal, an ensign, as something written and lifted up as a banner to communicate the message to those who are observant. It is from the Hebrew nun, which is seed. It's symbolic of the Zeroah, the one sowing the seeds for the harvest. And a shemek, which is an X sign, which is branching out like a tree with multiple roots and many branches. It's also the sign of a signature, of Yahweh's signature, and therefore symbolic of the Choter, who is the secondary branch. It is a nesh sign for the family. Through him, Gentiles, people unrelated or living outside of Yisrael, will continue to seek darash. They will inquire about, search for, and investigate, expecting to find a responsible presentation about engaging in the relationship, which is nourishing and keeps them safe, with ongoing implications throughout time. They're going to darash. And in this case, it's Gentiles. Why Gentiles? Because God's people are impossible. They don't listen. They haven't listened to Yahweh for 3,450 years. They think they're too damn smart, too clever with their G-D and their Hashem that they control to do what they want him to do. They think they're just too damn smart with their hundreds of thousands of pages of rabbinical arguments in the Talmud, the very book that created Islam, the very religion that created Christianity. They think they're really smart. And so when God looked and he spoke through the prophet Yeshayah on numerous occasions, he said, I looked for a single person that I could speak through among my people, and I found none. So I went to this Choter fellow. He is a Nakri, Nakar, which means he's an observant foreigner. And he will find exactly the same thing that Yahweh found. That the people who are inquisitive, who are open, who are searching, are no longer the Jews. They're Gentiles. And he will reach out to them first, which is exactly what has happened. And it is only when Jews begin to think independently, when they challenge the rabbis, when they challenge their politics, that they become receptive. And now a huge percentage of the covenant family is comprised of Jews, but it began with the Gentile speaking to those Gentiles who were searching, who were willing to investigate, who were responsible intellectually. And so therefore his restful residence will exist as a reward and source of enrichment, of energy and enlightenment. Isaiah 11:10. I'm a lot more comfortable when Yahweh says, this is the job. It's a tough damn job, and I'm giving you the tools to do the job. So let's get about it. When Yahweh says, okay, Yahweh's all about sharing credit. He's rewarding those who are willing to be diligent and steadfast, devoted to him and to his people, and particularly to his son. And so he's going to say, all right, I'm telling you that you may hammer away at this fella. You may disapprove him. You may mock him. You may disparage him. But his reward is with me, and I've got him covered. And that's because Yahweh is into sharing. He's into giving us more than we can contribute. And so it says this. I'm personally not comfortable dealing with it because I'd much rather say there's a job to do. It's a tough job. Let's go about and let's do the job. And then after the job is done, my hope is that Yahweh is happy. Now, Yahweh realized that with Moshe, he may not have reinforced his pleasure with Moshe or his understanding of what the job entailed, so that Moshe in Numbers 11 melted down and bowed out. And Yahweh didn't tell Moshe that he was wrong and that he should pick himself back up and the people weren't really so bad and that they had some redeeming qualities. He didn't do that at all. He just showed Moshe, listen, I got a couple of guys. You get them to the promised land. These guys will take it from there. And those guys were Eldod, Yahweh's, or the Yah's, God's beloved, that is Dod, and my Dod, the one who is serving as the strong arm of the king, my Dod. And he said, we got a couple of guys there. They're spiritually inspired. They're going to speak for me. And so here we find that God is all in with these fellas, and that this is his plan, and that this time he's going to be resolute because there is no opportunity for another chance. We have run out of time. And that the Shabuah harvest is open to both Goyim and Yehudim. And quite frankly, I think there'll be more Goyim than Yehudim, a part of that harvest, because Yehudim continue to be as belligerent as they were when they opposed Moshe and then Dod, when they opposed Shamuel as the last of the Shaphat judges. So this is the story that God is telling. Now, there are many interesting possibilities associated with this Nesh, since this sign is scribed by the Choder and associated with the Choder. The Choder is both the sign and the books that the Choder have written serve as that sign. This Choder, the secondary branch, the sucker growing out of the fallen rootstock that was Yisrael, presented growing out of that rootstock and stump that is responsible for Dod, representing Yisrael. Now, written beginning with the Hebrew nun, the seed, represents the son, Dod. It is closely associated with Zerah, the one sowing the seeds for the harvest. This is particularly interesting because it is followed by that Shemek, that X, leading in the direction of Hebrew, is written from right to left. This sign indicates that the sign, I should say, features three branches in diminishing size, representing the three Zerah, with Dod being the largest and most important, Moshe in the middle, and Yada is the smallest and thus a stem among the greater limbs. Therefore, even more than a sign, the Shemek has the appearance of either an olive tree or a grapevine with espaliated branches. This would not only suggest that its message would be scribed by a Choder, but also that it is firmly rooted in the garden that Dod planted on Zion, which itself means signs posted along the way. And from this perspective, it takes us back to the tree of lives and reminds us that Dod's son, Yahweh's son Dod, is the Shemek, the main branch that provides new life from the tree of lives. Therefore, considering the two letters that comprise this, the Shemek and the Nun, composition with the Nesh, we see Zerah, one of the three, sowing the seeds which take root and grow, as Dod, espaliated vineyard on Zion, the signs posted along the way, as the olive which is gleaned on Towrah as well, bearing fruit for the final harvest. It is growing out of the root stock from which the sun emerged, and from the trunk representing the fallen people of Yisrael, which will rise and bear fruit again. All of this and more is scribed as part of the Choter sign on behalf of the harvest and of the return of the main Shamak and the Zeroah. Now, as a result of all of this enormous effort directed towards Yahweh's wayward children, many will return home. So it will come to pass in that day, my upright one will once again associate his hand a second time to reacquire, bring forth, and redeem the remnant of his family who remain out of northern Iran and Iraq, from Mitzrayim, lower Egypt, out of Pathros, upper Egypt, from Cush, the Arabian Peninsula, out of southwestern Iran, Elam, from Shinar, Iraq, and Babylon, out of Chamash, Syria, and from the coastlines, the inhabited shores of countries bordered by large boundaries of water. Notably, in this case, that would be Lebanon, the United States, Canada, Central and South America, Western, Southern, and Northern Europe, Turkey, India, Australia, Northern and Southern Africa, these islands and coastlines of the sea, places where lots of Gentiles reside. Yashayah, Isaiah 11:11. We will speak of these people and what God intends to do with them in a moment, and actually in another program. But at this moment, what I would like to say is that in the Choter's second of three lives, Yahweh is going to do this very thing. It is described in great detail in Zechariah, where he arranges for a white chariot to span the globe during the time from the Towrah gleaning on Friday evening, the 23rd of September 2033, to that next morning and the dawn, which is the timing of the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, the greatest show on earth, with Eliah being the master of ceremonies. And that white chariot is going to canvass the world, and it's going to pick up every Yehud from all of these places that is anti-religious and apolitical, and bring them into Jerusalem so that they can be purged by and benefit from the sacrifice of the red heifer. This is why God is speaking of them at this time and in this way. And so I want you to make that connection, because this is specifically speaking of what will be the most miraculous day in the history of this earth as we live out the full promise of Towrah. So with that note, we'll resume here when next we pursue Appalling Twistianity and consider the implement that God has devoted to this cause of proving that there was no Jesus Christ, and that the actual Messiah and Son of God, our King and Savior, is Dode David. So I thank you for listening, and we'll return tomorrow. Good day.